Welcome, Good Fighters. This is the Good Fighters podcast. I'm Dr. Nash Stopko, coming to you live with Dr. Gates Mayer out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. This is the Good Fighters podcast, coming to you with a whole lot of connection, intention, and purpose, baby. So, Dr. Gates, this is our first episode since you brought Marshall into this beautiful world, man.
So, yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's feel different.
I'm sure, man. That's like stepping through a portal.
It literally was, man. It felt like, I mean, there's no going back, right? Like, you can't put the baby back in the womb or anything like that, you know? So, yeah, when I remember telling you guys that, and it literally does feel like that. And it's one of those things where you don't really, like, you remember, obviously it's only been a couple weeks, but like, you remember your life beforehand, but it's just like, way different, you know, like there's
easily like years ago.
Yes. Yes, it does. But it's been cool, man. And I was just looking at pictures before we were talking and stuff like that, and just like we took him for the first time outside yesterday. And it was funny because he it was kind of chilly and stuff like that, so we bundled him up and all that good stuff. And dude, he I don't know if it's because he liked outside or maybe it was like so too bright or what, but he fell asleep in like 5 seconds. So didn't even get to enjoy outside with him that much. He just fell asleep.
So much stimulus.
Yeah, just way too much, and he passed out. So, but it was a lot of fun, you know, just like being able to be a dad. It's not something that necessarily I grew up my whole life like thinking about, but it's something that I think I feel like I've stepped into the role of who I'm supposed to be becoming. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't feel like, yeah, there's challenging parts, but it doesn't feel like hard, I guess you could say right now. In terms of like, I just feel like very connected with him. Chantel gets mad sometimes because like I'll put him to sleep easy, and she's like, "What the heck?" Like, so definitely got some connection with him, which is awesome because you want that connection with your son, especially, you know, and just being able to, you know, you imagine what it'll be like the whole time he's in the womb, and it's been better than I could have ever imagined. You know, even just seeing him, like, you can tell like he's looking at me and like he recognizes me now. Which is a really, really cool feeling. So
yeah, because
dad life.
Yeah, man.
No dad bod yet, but dad life.
Working on it. I
realize now why, dude, dad strength happens, man. Like, you know that dad strength where you just like, just from holding a freaking 10-pound bowling ball all day, man. Like, dude, and the baby's like flopping everywhere and stuff like that. You got to get strong real quick.
For sure. You got to make up for that stability.
Yeah, right, dude. I keep trying to engage my core properly while holding this kid. And let me tell you what, it's freaking harder than trying to engage your core when like you have 250 pounds on your back or something like that, man.
It's like that gyro centrifuge ball you had in the bookstore.
Yes. That's true.
Floppy all over, you know.
Dude, he's a strong kid too, man. He's like holding his head, even from birth. Like, dude was holding his head up like instantly for a long period of time. I'm trying to get him, like, he's got pretty strong legs. So I told Chantel, I was like, all right, this kid's walking in, like, I looked up what the Guinness Book of World Records was for infant walking, and it's like 6 months. And I was like, we're beating it. This kid's gonna start walking or standing at least at 6 months. So
damn,
prodigy on his way.
Kid's gonna be I don't know, he's gonna be setting records.
Right? Yes, sir.
That's awesome.
Yes, sir.
So I don't know. I think it's super cool how, I mean, we always talked about it between Leilani and I, but we always knew that like that you're gonna fit the role so well, especially as dad.
Well, thank you.
Of course, but yeah, there's like inherent traits that you own that it's gonna be awesome for Marshall too, because you know he's not gonna have any limitations, or he's just gonna be able to just keep on growing and always adapting, and you know never getting stuck, right? Never never getting complacent in, his physical state, mental state, or spiritual state, I think is just going to be beautiful to have that environment for growth for him.
Dude, that's the coolest part. That like I can't wait till we can start. Like right now we're communicating, obviously, but like even more communication and just engaging in that stuff that both you and I have learned and hold dear to right now. I think, and what we talk about on this podcast, I think is really. I can't wait to pass it on. You know what I mean? And to set him up for success in life with good habits that encourage connection, intention, and purpose throughout his entire life, not just some of it. And granted, like there's things that he'll have to come into his own with, which will be hard to watch. I think he had like this little pink eye. It wasn't pink eye, I guess. It was like a black tear duct, but probably about last week sometime. And Chantel and I, this was like his first like illness, right? Chantel and I were like, holy crap, what do we do? And like I was freaking out too, because I was like, man, I do not want this kid to have pink eye and like have it get too severe where he has to take antibiotics or anything like that. Like we worked so hard to make this kid like the pure blood, right? But fun fact, if you have a blocked tear duct or pink eye, breast milk does some wonders. So
cool.
Just right in the eye.
Nice. So that kind of leads me into like what I was gonna ask you about. So I know we talk about connection, intention, and purpose, obviously every show, and you already kind of hit on some connection between you and Marshall. Some can you let some of the viewers and listeners know a little bit more about your intentions so far as a dad?
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, the intention obviously started way back when we first found out we were pregnant, and it also transitions too along the way. Because like initially when we first found out we were pregnant, I like obviously we're trying to start a business and stuff like this. So I'm like, whoa, what the heck? Like we're not gonna have any money to take care of this kid. We're not gonna have like, your mind starts racing because it's nothing we've ever dealt with before necessarily. So automatically, like I think my intention and connection was not there at the beginning, but over time, as he grew in the womb and as you start to connect with him in the womb, I think it was really cool to build up to this point and intentionally be able to know that, okay, we got Chantel up on some good, adjustment schedule to make sure she's has everything that she needs. Same with the baby and whatnot, and even like food, nutrition wise. So my intention shifted not necessarily from, okay, how hard this is going to be, but okay, how can I set this kid up for as much success as possible? For what we can control, right? And what we can control is full life expression, as much as we'll control it to our capability as chiropractors, right? And like every check mark, kid was like perfect. So Chantel, every midwife checkup, just like boom, 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 like textbook. Our midwife was awesome. She was just like, this kid is just doing great. The only like non-textbook thing was that he wasn't exactly in position prior to birth. He was in position for like a 2-week time span, which is basically his back is to the left. They call it LOA. His back is to the left of mom's abdomen and stuff like that, just prime position. So he was there for probably about 2 weeks leading up to week 40. And then he switched back to the right side. But I told Chantal, I was like, hey, he's just scoping it out. He didn't want to stay there, but he's scoping it out for the time being. Because then eventually during the labor process, he flipped back over that side.
Nice.
But so my intention just shifted to, okay, setting this kid up for as much success as possible. And when I say it was textbook perfect, like it really was. I know that you and I talked about it before too on my voice messages and stuff. I was like, he's just hitting every mark. Like it's hard not to think about, well, when's the shoe gonna drop? You know what I mean? Like, especially doing a home birth, it's sometimes very easy to get that in the back of your mind. But I was just blown away by what God did, because Chantel's birth was overall active labor was like 6.5 hours. Entirely, like from the time her contractions started to the time like baby popped out, it was just under 9 hours. So like
for first baby, that's like really, really, really short.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and all of our friends were like, "What the heck?" Like, and obviously, which is cool because we wanted this to be a testament to our families and to our, friends to be like, look, look at not only what our bodies are capable of, but also what is possible when you do take care of things the way you're supposed to. And not to say that it's going to be perfect every time, but like, it's just a really good testament to say, you know what, you can have a successful, short, at home birth with no complications, and have it be beautiful,
Right.
um, and that was really big for me and my family because we had some friends that had not so great of an experience with the home birth and a midwife. But a lot of that came down to really trusting Innate, obviously, but then trusting to our midwife, who has shout out to Birth Song, Yolanda. She's the best. Super. I liked her stuff from the beginning. Reading her philosophy portion on her website, dude, it was like if you and I wrote it.
I remember you were telling me about her, like when you're looking up midwives, like, dude, I found this midwife who literally sounds like a chiropractor. So
Yeah. Yep.
no, I remember you talked about her and had nothing but praise for her early on. So yeah, I guess that's one big thing that I wanted, at least I'm happier to kind of touch on, because I was going to ask about like your process of, determining what seemed like a good midwife. And I think
Yeah.
one is literally reading up on them and finding one that sounds like at least preliminary before you even meet them. Is, do their belief systems and their philosophies kind of coincide with what I'm looking for?
Right.
I know a lot of
And
our
go ahead.
so a lot of our listeners, I mean, chiropractors in school, out of school, whatever, eventually some point or another, most people are going to have a new family member come into this world. So I think that's a big part of the process. Really making yourself feel like you're having somebody who's walked that path before. And I think that's a really important part of the process for having those home births, is having that physical and spiritual guide of a midwife that has those same belief systems, right?
Yeah, and it was one of those things too where it was a huge blessing in disguise because like we didn't have health insurance at the time. We were looking at midwives and cost benefit too, and it just like checked off every mark. Philosophy wise, like it was one that I knew would honor my intention to have this birth be as, I don't know, I don't want to say natural as possible, but have this birth be as um, less interference as possible, I guess you could say.
You wanted to flow, right? Like the
Right. And that's exactly what it was, almost to the point where sometimes it'd be like we'd go in for a checkup and she'd do her thing, check heartbeat, all this kind of stuff. And it was like, that was it. Like, it wasn't a big deal. It was just, hey, baby's doing what a baby's going to do. And it was cool interacting with her too, because she had dealt with, obviously as a midwife, you come across different chiropractors and stuff before. And just gaining some insight from her on like how I can help Chantel better.
yeah.
In terms of my adjusting capabilities and stuff like that. Because I mean, at school, I didn't really deal with a lot of pregnant females or anything like that. So, I mean, I was texting my Lonnie all the time for like, hey, what do you do for this? What do you do for that? And just trying to soak in as much as I could. And she helped a portion of that too. But yeah, just choosing a midwife based on philosophy alone was good to be able to not only recognize that whatever I wanted, she would respect, because we were kind of already on that same wavelength, but then at the same time trusting her too, because she had delivered like over 3,500 babies. Like she had a good reputation as far as, as a home birth, there's that, like I said in the beginning, back of your mind, you're like, okay, what if something happens, complication wise? And she wasn't one to necessarily falter on that in terms of like, no, like if we're going to go, we're going to go. Like, I'm not going to wait around and see necessarily.
Yeah.
So that was big for us, and just that confidence. And I had full confidence that Chantel could do it, obviously. And I do want to give a shout out to one book out there that was huge and integral in terms of, I think, a really big mindset shift for Chantel, because, I mean, her and I go back and forth in terms of mentality and connection, intention, and purpose. And she's through her own evolution process right now. But Hypno Birth or Hypno Birthing, there's a book out there. There's also a course. But it really talks about that fear, pain, tension cycle that a lot of moms get into when they're in a hospital or when they're in a setting that isn't necessarily conducive to birth, because then it shares all these moments from this guy. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he was basically recounting like all these birth stories he'd heard where these moms gave birth in like literally one of them was this mom was giving birth in the trenches of World War II, just like gave birth no problem, picked up her baby, and then walked like back home. Like,
wow.
Just incredible stories like that where no complications, like did what she had to do. And that's what we're capable of. But, rarely do we tap into that.
Right.
And more often than not, we force a baby out in today's modern medicine and different things like that, and don't let them go based on their timeline. So yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where you choose your midwife based on not only philosophy, but also your trust in them too, to make the decision. Because I wanted to trust her decision. If Chantel was like having a problematic labor or something like that, and she needed to have a C-section, then it's there for the reason it's there, put there for, not because some doctor just said we had to, but because she actually has to. You know what I mean? So the confidence in that was huge too.
I think that's an important part about the entire process as well. Is there's nothing wrong with having a child in the hospital, right? I mean,
right.
It's done all day, every day, probably millions of times. And I think one important difference between the two is there's some certain level of like trust that is just hard to build up sometimes in those hospitals.
Yeah.
Where it's just like there's an obscure factor where like it's like a little bit of a disconnect between like what is going on, especially as mom, versus like what the doctor's thinking, doing, versus like the intimate at home with a midwife who you've been with the entire process. And
right.
I just think the perception of the entire thing of like what's possible and what's not is a little bit different.
Well, and when you have birth in the middle of COVID stuff, that was one thing that was like, we're not messing with that crap. Like, there's no
trying to put a mask on you on a mask, it's just like, dude, yeah.
Yeah, we were not about that. And especially at the time, like some places weren't even letting husbands go in during their ultrasounds, which like, there's no way in heck that, I mean, you couldn't pay me to not do that. So,
right.
Yeah. Whether you choose to give birth in a hospital or at home, be as comfortable as you can, and the dividends will pay off,
Yeah. And doing all the right stuff beforehand, like,
right. Yeah.
I think that's where you can build the most confidence, is literally just knowing you've done everything right, and not just doing it right, but embodying that. So
yeah, and that's
fortune.
Right, and that's the biggest thing that I always constantly tried to convey to Chantel during the entire process was like, hey, your body's adapting. It's going through things. We're doing things right. Like, it's okay if you maybe feel a little bit off sometimes, or this or that, the other thing. Like, yeah, I know it can be scary because you're trying to make your way through, but you're doing things the way that we know we're supposed to. We're taking care of things.
Yeah.
And then I always come back to, dude, like, for millennia, we had babies, in, I don't know, barns.
Yeah, I mean,
so
seriously.
Always going back to that point of like, we got it pretty good if we're in a pretty decent apartment.
Yeah.
And not too far away from a hospital. So
not too far away from a hospital, and literally having that midwife who literally you said has delivered 3,500 babies, right? At home.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Did you guys do anything? So kind of can you take me through like what you guys as soon as you guys had Marshall, what was going on afterwards?
Oh, dude. Time really stops, in that moment. I I want to back up right before that moment because there's this moment, that crescendo of life being born, where it's like your whole 9 months, and then you're pushing, which is also like labor, and then like I just like a boom, like, and the baby pops out. It was pretty crazy because he was like crowning for a decent amount of time. Like, obviously it was short compared to most births, but he was crowning for a decent amount of time when you're counting the minutes and stuff like that, and amount of pushes. Um, but like his head popped out, like, and I'm more near Chantel's like torso, and I'm like looking at him, like, and he had some of the cord around his neck, nothing like dangerous or anything like that. But so midwife like unlooped that really quickly. That's another thing. Like, we were asking about that because I guess Chantel had that too when she was born. Mm-hmm. And like concerned with that, but it happens a lot of times to babies, and that thing is mad stretchy, so wasn't too concerned about that. But she unlooped it real quick, and like the next push, the midwife looks at me and she's like, "All right, Dad, it's time to bring your son into the world." And I was just like looking at her, because I had expressed that I wanted to catch him, like I wanted to bring him out, but my mind never really thought about what that moment would be like, I guess you could say. Like, I just expected him to just like pop out and I'd catch him. Yeah. But she was like, "All right, Dad, it's time to pull your son out." And I was just staring at her, and then she's like, "Dad, you got to pull your son out." And I was like, "Okay." And so I went in, and and this is that crescendo moment, and I like scooped him up. He cries for like 2 seconds. And like I scooped him up underneath his arms and stuff like that, and bring him out, bodily fluids spraying out, like I'm sitting in placenta juices. I don't know. And then so like I bring him up and like place him on Chantel, and he's like laying there on his stomach. He cried for about like 2 seconds after I brought him out, and then afterwards he's just like looking around, butt naked, obviously. And then the midwife puts like a towel over him. We asked her not to, like, she wasn't going to, but like wipe him off and stuff from the vernix on and stuff. So so I'm just like, we're just like sitting there like looking at him. I don't even know what was going on outside of that. Like, I have no clue what anybody was or anything was doing. Like, I was just like locked eyes on the baby. Yeah. And just admiring how, because we hadn't seen, like, nowadays you can do like the 4D photos or like the 4D ultrasound and stuff like that. So we hadn't seen anything like that. So we were just locked in, just like admiring him and being like, whoa, like, first of all, pretty cute kid. Like, didn't, like how babies pop out and they're like, kind of, their face is kind of swollen and stuff like that. Well, his wasn't really swollen because during the birth, her water didn't break till like, okay, I gotta backtrack. We gotta go through this because it was freaking wild. But long story short, time stops when that baby's out and you're just staring at him for the first time. So her like active labor started around like 3:30 or so, and was like progressing really, really fast. But when I had called Yolanda, and that's our midwife's name, obviously she's delivered like a lot of babies, and I don't think she was necessarily expecting it to move as quick as it did, because I called her and then we kind of went back and forth, and I was like, yeah, like, and I think I was underselling the amount of contractions because I wasn't exactly timing them, and Chantel was like they were like pretty constant. So I kind of undersold that, like, hey, we're probably further along than I think we are, because I don't know, and trying to convey it, because Chantel too at the same time, like, so our midwife, she is a very like stern personality, I guess you could say, which is really good because when things are going and happening, like, you need that. Yeah. And she's not just like this complacent like grandma, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so every time we call her, she'd be like, okay, like, thanks for letting me know. And she didn't like seem concerned, or she didn't seem like she was going to come right away either, which wasn't a big deal because she kind of told us that already. Yeah. But Chantel was like in the middle of labor, and she's like, I don't want to call her again because she's not going to come. Like she's just she's just waiting basically.
Right.
So Chantel like kept pushing it off, and she was kind of being stubborn about it. And I was like, these contractions are like really close apart. Like, I think we need to call her to come over here. And she was like, no. So then I was like, all right, but at this time, like, I'm calling. That time hits, and I was like, all right, I'm going to call Yolanda. And she's like, no, don't. And I was like, I'll give you 15 minutes more. Called it 15 minutes. And I was like, hey, these contractions are pretty close apart. Like, I kind of think you should start making your way over. She's like, all right, I'll start moseying over. I'll probably be there in about an hour. I was like, all right, whatever. And then in the meantime, Chantel, she's either in the tub in the hot water or in the shower in hot water. And like 15 minutes after that phone call, Chantel gets up out of the tub and she's like standing there, and she goes, I just hear like, Gates, I think I feel his head. And I was like, holy crap, like how did we go from just a few like contractions to feeling his head? Like we missed something.
Yeah, right. We skipped a step.
Yeah, we skipped a step. And in my mind, obviously, I'm like, Frank, I have to deliver this baby. Like, I'm not prepped for this, you know? And so I call Yolanda, and that's the midwife's name. And I was like, hey, we think we feel his head. And she's like, what? And just hangs up the phone. And then she calls me like, so she hangs up the phone, and I was like, well, great. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do in this time period.
Right.
So Chantel's just kind of hanging out there still. And then she calls me again probably about 5-10 minutes later. She's like, sorry, I hung up. I was brushing my teeth and like getting ready to go. But I'm heading over now. You need to get her out of the tub basically and onto the bed. And we had like these bed pads. So we had to get everything ready on the bed.
Yeah.
And pull the towels out and stuff. So Chantel's like laying there she's in the tub, and then Yolanda's like, hey, you got to get her on her left side and have her lay there, put something in between her legs. Then I'm on my way. So I think the baby's head is popping out because I tried to feel it too. And obviously it's our first time, like we thought it was his head, you know?
Yeah.
She lays down, and then I'm looking obviously up the birthing canal, and it's the like water sac that's actually protruding out.
Gotcha.
And it was crazy. Like this thing, you know, like those squishy balls that have like stuff inside of them.
Yes.
With the liquid, and you squeeze it and you can see it floating around. That's exactly what it looked like, dude. It was wild. But then at the same time, I'm like, man, if this thing busts, like I don't know what to do. Like Yolanda's still on the speakerphone, and she's like asking me questions, and I'm like, yeah, like I can see the water sac, but it's protruding. Like this thing's ready to blow, right? And so she's like, okay, I'll be there, blah, blah, blah. Chantel's just like, she's in labor, right? And at this point, I think she did have a significant amount of pain because she was having trouble relaxing because Yolanda wasn't there. Yeah. And she thought she felt his head, and I was like, hey, it's okay. Like, it's not his head. How can we make you more comfortable? But I think she was having a hard time relaxing. And she was not there. So I think she was trying to, you know, not relax too much so that this thing didn't pop out. Right.
Yeah.
And dude, this thing was like with each contraction, like dang near like about to bust any moment, or like it was like almost like a tennis ball was like sticking out basically of the birthing canal. And at one point I'm looking at it, and I'm like my mouth is open. I'm like, holy crap, like this baby's coming, like can't see him. And then I was like, I should probably close my mouth in case this thing busts and then like shoots inside my mouth. And so in the meantime of all this going on, my parents and my sister are on the way. They get there probably about like 9-10 or so. And Yolanda's on her way. She's probably going to be there in 10 minutes too. So they come up the stairs. I was like, hey, mom and dad, like you should probably go to the hotel. Because the last thing I think my wife wanted was to hear like my dad's voice and my mom's voice outside the place, even though like her mom was in there and stuff, but just trying to make her more comfortable.
Yeah.
And my sister was there in case she needed help too. Because originally she was going to be there in case Chantel's mom wasn't able to be there. So I was like, hey, can you just keep an eye out for the midwife? And my mom and dad, they ended up not going to the hotel. They ended up just waiting outside. I think they were more concerned probably because like I was like freaking out externally. Maybe I'm not necessarily the best at keeping, even though my mind like I can keep composure. My facial expression looks probably different than normal.
Yeah.
So, you know, even though inside I was like kind of freaking out, but not like to the point, oh, she's gonna like die or anything like that, you
No.
know?
But I mean, dude, it's exciting. Like,
It's exciting, yeah. And so they just waited outside, and then Yolanda gets there probably about 9:20ish, and then like 2 contractions later, this thing pops, right? And so like then it's go time, right? Like it's time to push and everything like that. And Chantel's pushing. Yolanda keeps listening into the heart and different things like that. There was one part where like she was like, "Hey, like you have to be intentional about these pushes every time because he's coming around like the bed, basically. And you can't stay there for long." So pushing, 10, 12, baby boy pops out, like I pull him out and everything like that. And just like a rush. I don't even know how, like, I've been trying to figure out the exact emotion that and the closest thing I can come to is just pure gratitude and just like a rut, just like full on gratitude as much as I can probably think of. And pulled him out and just like this beautiful moment of looking at him, staring at him, and different things like that. Just thinking to myself, wow, like this birth went freaking perfect. Like, yeah, there was craziness in the meantime, but I'm glad that everything basically worked out to the time when we told my parents, because Chantel was like convinced it was false labor when we called my parents. Yeah. But I was like, no, babe, like these are like 10 minutes pretty much on the dot for like 3 hours.
Yeah.
I think because she had listened to so many podcasts that talked about false labor and different things like that. And so just pulling them out, like just this intense rush of emotion, gratitude. Like I didn't feel like crying, but like just like intense, you know? I don't even know how to describe it really, but and it was really cool to see too, like Chantel, there's so many hormone surges that are going on and whatnot. Like at certain points she's like shaking and different things like that. And I'm like, are you cold? Like, are you like, I didn't know what it was, but the midwife was just like, no, it's just like a hormonal surge. Like it's normal. And it's good because she's expelling these different hormones that were used for the birth. So
yeah.
Just incredible to think about the body's capability. And Chantel was most nervous probably about like nursing and different things like that because you have to nurse right away and get some colostrum and stuff like that. But I mean, dude latched pretty much perfectly. They both did a great job. And then ever since then, like her milk supply has been like a ton, which is great. And she's like, at times she's like, oh geez, my milk supply is like so much. Cause sometimes she'll do what's called the Hawkeye. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's kind of like not a pump, but it catches some of the milk letdown that comes from the other breast when the baby's feeding on the other side.
Sure.
And she'll have like consistently like 3 to 4 ounces and stuff. And she's like, man, like it's just so much. And I'm like, don't put that out. Like, take what we can get. Like, but don't put that out in the universe. Like, you wanted a lot of milk, so here it is. And just like embrace it. And so, overall, man, just like seeing that adaptation and seeing the amount of body's natural capability in that moment to that crescendo to that one portion where it builds up to that point, and I'm just kind of like, you're just kind of watching and waiting, and I was trying to like soak in as much as possible so that I could just remember it like crazy vivid. And so pops out, pull him out, and just that rush of gratitude, that rush of just like, wow, this is my kid, and it still doesn't feel real, but you know, just I just am constantly in awe of like, dude, like this kid formed in the womb for 9 months and we didn't have to do anything. You know, it's not like we thought about how to form them or anything like that, you know? So it just consistently is like incredible to witness and watch that process.
Organization of all of it, right? Or like, I mean,
right.
mean, it's amazing the development of a baby in the womb. Especially with you talking about it. From the very first thing to start to develop, right, is the nervous system.
Yeah, dude.
And not just from nervous system, but from like nervous system to like internal organs, brain, to literally all the way down to like their little face, to like hands. I don't know, man. Just the organization of it all is just so amazing. So.
And dude, that was the one thing that I was like, this is incredible.
Yeah.
The fact that this baby could be formed in like this brain and nervous system form. Like, I had seen other kids and like their nervous system, like the reflexes and stuff. But even more so, seeing the reflexes on like my own kid is just like, wow, how in the heck did this form? you know?
Yeah. And formed not just from you, but from you and Chantal. So.
Right. Yeah.
That's
a two-part system.
That's amazing.
Yeah, dude, it was I don't know, just that moment of like intense, like I said, gratitude that I just consistently think back to, and I try to like do my best to recount the story. So like I wrote it down in my notes on my phone or whatever.
Oh, cool.
Trying to just like times, place, all this kind of stuff. Because before, when they first started, we were at this park. And then we went to Meyer for some reason. I don't remember why. But just like they were constantly 10 minutes. I'm just trying to like remember little things like that so that I can look back on it and try to, like I said before, just soak it all in as much as possible,
Yeah. What's it been like since, so it's been 2.5 weeks?
Yeah, about.
So with Marshall, is he, tell us a little about like what he's doing now, like sleep patterns,
yeah,
activity.
Yeah, it's a lot of sleep, a lot of eating. Kid eats like none other, dude. Like I think he's going through a growth spurt right now because he was probably at the beginning eating about 2 ounces or so.
Okay.
And then recently he's been up to like 4 ounces, like just a lot, maybe even more than that, a lot of milk. Because this past weekend, I wanted to give Chantal a little bit of break so she can catch up on some sleep. So I wanted to kind of avoid bottle feeding as much as possible. But every now and then, like I'll feed him a bottle just so we can connect, but then also give Chantal a time for like break. Because it's hard breastfeeding. I think that's one thing that I probably didn't give enough credit to moms prior to this, but just like breastfeeding is difficult, especially when he's eating probably about every 3 hours or so. It's taxing. So trying to support her, and he's just gobbling up food like crazy.
Right.
Sleeping patterns. He stays asleep. He likes to snuggle a lot, so it's harder to put him in like his bassinet. So sometimes I'll just like lay on the couch and just like hold him and fall asleep, and he'll sleep too. So, but he's been doing this thing where like he's not awake, but he's not crying in his sleep, but like it's kind of like fake crying a little bit.
Fussy a little bit, or?
Yeah, just like a little fussy. But again, like I think he just like likes to be near people and likes to be comforted and stuff like that. So, honestly, I get mad though when I get home and like he's asleep and I'm like, damn, like I want to hang out with him and stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, there was this one part last week where I was able to hang out with him, and I'm gonna show you this picture because it's like by far the funniest picture that I've been able to take of him. Because I don't even know what he was doing. He was like sitting on my lap, and he just like was making this like just like weird face, just like chilling there.
Oh my god!
Basically butt naked. His belly looks like a distended belly from like freaking African children. Just like
the kid looks like he hasn't had protein in a while or something.
Dude, I don't even know. Like he's just like sitting there, his like chin is tucked back like so deep, and I'm just like I'll sit here and look at it and just like crack up. Like this is one of my favorite pictures.
For real.
That and when he's like sleeping, he'll smile because he's like pooping, I guess, and stuff. So that's always funny to me.
Oh man.
But it's been good. Trying to like keep up on adjusting and keeping an eye out for different cues that maybe he needs to get adjusted and whatnot. Adjusting babies is kind of hard. I don't like adjusting babies because they're so delicate. They need it, but they're so delicate. So it's not necessarily my forte. So I've been adjusting them up until now, but what we'll probably end up doing is just taking them to another Pete's Chiro.
Yeah.
Just to continue, getting him the best care possible. And I'll still adjust him every now and then, obviously, but I want to make sure that he gets, even more set up.
Right.
So, but there's nothing better than adjusting your kid, and especially too when you're doing it from the get go. It's not like he's 10 and he's getting started adjusting like day one, hour one.
Yeah. And just I don't know, that positive feedback on physical touch, right? That's
right. Yep. And he thrives on that. So that's another reason why too. I'm like, I don't really want to put him in the bassinet because he does better. And it's kind of like a no nowadays to like technically sleep with your baby, but
right.
The more I talk to moms and the more I research, people do it all the time. And obviously we've been doing it for centuries.
Right.
So millennia.
Yeah. What were people doing back before?
Right. You just gotta be safe about it. But one of the biggest problems is like making sure that Peanut, like our cat, didn't try and smother him while we were sleeping, basically.
Yeah, so what's Peanut been like?
Oh, dude. So when everything was going down, we put her in another room, obviously. And whenever we lock her in a room, she gets pissed because she likes to be out and about. But it's like you can't be there for the birth. Like, sorry, kitty. And so like the first couple of days, every time she heard him cry, like she'd hiss and snort, do her like snorting thing like that.
Yeah.
And then once everybody kind of left, because like my family was here in town and stuff, and so she was just all around in a pissy mood. Every time she sniffed something from him, hiss, do her snorts. And then now it's like when he cries, she doesn't really care, but she'll come and like just kind of like look at him. I've been taking him over to like when we feed her, taking him with me, so she sniffs him and like she can get that kind of positive emotion too. And so it's recently she's been really good in just like observing, sniffing, not really one way or the other. But then yesterday, dude, I was napping with him in bed and she came up. And usually when she sees that he's there, she's like kind of sad because I hold him like on my side, which is kind of where she would sleep.
Yeah.
But yesterday she popped up and she knew he was there. And so she just laid down next to him like he was like my arm basically. So they snuggled up a little bit yesterday. It was their first snuggle. She only stayed for like 5 seconds, but it's a start. So trying to ingrain, hey, you got to protect this kid. You got to help him and do all this kind of stuff. So she's learning, she's learning just like him. But, I forgot to mention, dude, the coolest thing about having a kid is watching their body adapt like to the external world, like kid has never breathed there before. Kid has never had his own heartbeat. Kid has never like filtered his own blood, his own poop, like his own urine. And seeing that like process take place is something that is so maybe taken for granted and we don't think about, but just watching that adaptation take place before my eyes is just like continues to I continue to love it. You know what I mean? And same with Peanut. She's adapting too. We're all adapting, right?
Big sister.
I think I'm running off 5 hours of sleep consistently now. So
how's that been for you?
It's been off and on. Like some days I won't care too much, and then other days when I wake up, like it's really hard. Like waking up every 3 hours, I'm not gonna lie, like that freaking sucks. To feed him or change him, like the last thing you want to do is change his diaper at 2 a.m. in the morning. There's been some times where I look at Chantal, I'm like, do we really have to change it? Can we just leave it? But she's been good about keeping up on that. So Sleep wise, like running on short sleep, it hasn't been too bad. Like you just kind of do it. You just kind of make it happen, and then every now and then you can catch up. Like the reason why I started sleeping with him some more too, like on the couch or something where I'll hold him, is because I can actually sleep more doing that.
Yeah.
So that's been good. Just trying to like, I don't know. Like I said, you just kind of do it. You don't think about necessarily like, oh, my sleep schedule is going to be jacked tomorrow. Like I'm going to suck at work, or like, oh, I hate not getting 8 hours of sleep. You just kind of do it and you run with it, I guess,
Adapt or die, right? So you just gotta. You yourself was a big adapting period too, not just Marshall.
Yeah. That's totally true.
You guys are. Everybody's entering a new realm of like who they're becoming. So that's
yeah. Oh, definitely feel leveled up. I told Aaron and Madison the other day, I was like, man, I'm trying to beat all these dads out and like not be a basic dad. So trying to make that happen, and the more I can do that, the more I can continue to take it another level up to where I need to be. So
so with the leveling up process, how does Chantel feel about what, like, her? I mean, she's going through about more changes than anybody, right? So what's that been like for her recently? I mean, 2.5 weeks out, so is she sleeping a lot still? I'm assuming
she's trying to. She ebbs and flows.
Okay.
It's one of those things where I have to constantly remind her that, like, babe, like you have to take care of yourself. Like you cannot skip supplements. You cannot skip sleep. You cannot like just be on your phone. Like you have to prioritize yourself.
Yeah.
And when she does that, she sees a lot more benefit. When I see her not doing that is when she gets a little bit more like either frustrated or not feeling herself. So I think her adaptation right now, she's still like in the thick of it more than maybe I am even. And she's making it through. I mean, she's a great mom and she's been doing her thing, but it definitely can be frustrating when like, if maybe sometimes he doesn't latch like he's supposed to, or like, he was doing this thing for a little bit where he was just like biting down instead of like suckling for milk and stuff like that. So that kind of pissed her off a little bit. But just making sure like to let her know she's doing a great job. Which is hard for me because like I am not the world's most encouraging person per se all the time. So like I've been trying to be more adamant about that because she needs it.
Oh yeah.
And trying to do anything I can to help support her. But she's making it through. It's just I think it's a little bit more challenging than she had maybe anticipated, or like. But she doesn't prioritize herself very well. So she's being a mom in terms of like prioritizing him, but then putting herself on the back burner. So I've just been trying to remind her like, hey, you still have to take care of yourself so that you can be mentally clear too, and physically not bogged down also.
Right?
What?
I would just be the best for Marshall.
Right. And so in any way I can try to do that, I try. Even if it's just to remind her to eat, or even if she just like needs to go do some stretching or something like that. So I think it's been maybe a little bit more difficult for her on the post birth side. Not like a postpartum type of thing or anything like that yet, but she's learning too. So
awesome, bro. I do have to split, so unfortunately, I have to cut this talk a little bit short. But I can't wait to dive more into it, bro, because I feel like we're still just like tip of the iceberg with everything.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing is, man, we get to watch this whole process with you. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, y'all get front row seats.
Yeah, man. So thank you so much for sharing everything. Do you have any final thoughts or anything you want to share with everybody?
I mean, just if you're having a baby or you think about having a baby, just sit back and admire it. Don't try to force anything. Just sit back and admire it.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you so much, Gates, and thank you all good fighters for listening today. Hope you guys had something to take away from this that you found valuable. I know I did. Just thank you for sharing. And
Yeah.
It gives me a lot of insight into something I don't know anything about yet. So
yeah, glad I could. Glad I could share.
Well, you're an inspiration, bro. To all good fighters out there, you know where to find us. Just thank you so much. Keep fighting that good fight.
Yes, sir.
Choose your destiny.